Good evening. Welcome to Using Schoolnet to Support Remote Learning. This is Pam Batchelor with Digital Teaching and Learning. I'm excited to have you on the webinar with us tonight. We do have about 400 folks registered for the webinar tonight, so we will give everyone just a minute to get signed in. We do have a slide deck copy in the handout section of GoToWebinar, so we're going to go ahead and do a couple of housekeeping items. You will see a link to the presentation tonight in our chat box, as well as under that handout section of GoToWebinar. So you can use either one of those two areas to get on the slide deck, because we have lots of links to share with you tonight. We're going to do a couple of quick audio checks, but first I'm going to introduce, let the folks who are with me tonight introduce themselves on the call. I have a couple of my colleagues who are going to be helping with questions and also with the chat tonight. So.
Good evening, everybody. This is Jill Darrow. Great to be with you. I'm with Digital Teaching and Learning. I'm a Southeast consultant, and I coordinate professional learning for the Digital Learning Initiative. Excited to be with you all tonight.
And I'm Molly Holloman. I'm in Dare County, and I'm currently serving as the Eastern Educator on Loan for the Division of Digital Teaching and Learning.
Great, thank you so much. We really appreciate having Molly and Jill with us tonight. Just a couple of logistics while everyone is getting logged in. There is a question bar in the GoToWebinar. Please use the question bar. If you have questions at any point in time, this will keep track of the questions as they're asked. With so many people on a webinar, it is quite possible that we may not be able to answer all of your questions tonight, but GoToWebinar will keep a track for us of who asked which question, and we will follow up when you have your CEU certificate with a FAQ document of frequently asked questions from this webinar. So just go ahead and type in your questions into the questions panel as you have them. A couple of notes. On the slide, there is a troubleshoot audio issues, and we'll have either Jill or Molly put this in the chat to make sure that you can switch between the computer and phone call, and also look for the sound check to see if you're having any sound issues. We are going to do a couple of quick questions just to make sure everyone can see us and hear us okay. So we're first going to ask if everyone can hear. So we're launching this quick poll. So if you can hear us, please indicate that. All right, and we do have a few people who said they can't hear, but most people can. And then the last next question is going to be, can you see our screen that was projected? All right, looks like everyone can see our screen. And then we're gonna quickly understand who is in the house tonight. So we're very excited to have so many folks joining us. We just want to get a quick pulse of who is joining us virtually tonight. So we'll leave this open for about 5 more seconds. If you could select your role, and GoToWebinar only allows me to have 5 options. So I apologize if I'm missing your exact role on here. I had to kind of summarize down into 5 roles. So we're just to let everyone know who is in the webinar tonight. We have mostly classroom teachers, some instructional coaches and facilitators, some school library media coordinators, and some school administrators and district administrators. Thank you. A good mix. One last question that I have for everyone, and that is if you've used Schoolnet to give an assessment this year with your students, just to see what the experience is in the room tonight. All right, 5 more seconds to vote. All right, and so it looks like we have about 42% who have used Schoolnet this year and about 58% that have not. So going back to our presentation, our topics for today. We're going to cover some webinar CEU basics, and then really we have two halves to talk about tonight, because when we're talking about remote learning, a very important component of that is, do your students have internet access, right? So we're going to kind of talk about how you can use Schoolnet to support online learning if you have that internet access, and then we're going to talk about how you can use Schoolnet if you do not have that access. All right. So some CEU basics for the webinar tonight. You will receive 0.1 CEU for your live participation in the webinar tonight. It will come via email to the email address that you used to register for the webinar tonight. So if you used your personal or home email address, just keep in mind that is where your certificate will be sent. We do recommend the credit is for digital learning competency credit. However, approval is up to your local public school unit. So please make sure you follow all local processes, providing a written justification and any artifacts that are requested by your local public school unit. You will receive that email within 5 business days after this webinar. Please give me that 5 business days. It does take some time to certify attendance and generate certificates, as well as complete that FAQs sheet that I talked about that will be coming. So you'll have the questions and answers for all of the frequently asked questions tonight. So please give me that 5 business days to get that out to you, as well as a recording of the session and a copy of the slide deck. So you will get all of that information emailed to you within 5 business days. One note about GoToWebinar, this is something that we've recently learned. If you are joining using your phone, please make sure you're using the GoToWebinar app. If you are just using the call-in number, we do not have a record of your attendance, and you will not get the follow-up email with all of the materials I just listed. So it's perfectly fine if you need to use a phone to join us tonight, but please make sure you have the app installed on your phone. It's a free app available for your Android, iPhone, Windows Phone devices. So just make sure you have that app so that way you get your follow-up information. All right, so most of you tonight said that you are new to Schoolnet or haven't used it this year. What this webinar is going to go over, I'm not walking you through the very basics of this is Schoolnet and this is how to use it. We do have a website that has all of our webinars archived for the last 2 years. There are some getting started webinars that are very specific to Schoolnet and will walk you step by step through the process of creating a test, building a test. I will be linking to the directions tonight, but I'm not going to be going step by step through the process. So if you're brand new to Schoolnet, I highly encourage you to go to the site and to go to the webinar archive and look at some of the webinars that are archived there to get yourself more familiar with Schoolnet, because it does have a learning curve. Just like any other ed tech tool, you have to learn how to use the system, and the time pays off. It's worth it. But just to let you know, it's more than in a 1-hour webinar we can cover tonight along with the topics. So just make sure you bookmark that Schoolnet Google site, and that'll become your new best friend. All right, so I want to start off tonight with just a little personal reflection. So we are in unprecedented times. We have never faced this kind of pandemic before with the technology that we have. And I want you just to take a second to remember what matters most. And so what matters the most, of course, are our students. This is a picture of my son and daughter. My son's a 3rd grader, so he's very much affected by everything that's going on right now with school closures. And, this is supposed to be his first year taking end of year assessments. So just to take a moment to remember what matters as in our students. And we need to give ourselves a lot of grace. If this is your first time ever using Schoolnet or hearing about Schoolnet, do not put a lot of pressure on yourself to say, okay, I need to learn and make an assessment by tomorrow to give to my students. That's not a healthy goal in this time. All all right? Take things slow. Remember that, you know, you are only one person, and what matters the most is your students. And really what they want and what they need the most right now is just your reassurance that you care and that they are safe. My son was just happy to hear from his teachers. That's really what he wanted, was just to know what they're doing. That's his most pressing need right now. So just remember what matters, and, you know, give ourselves all a lot of grace, and don't feel like you have to try to do everything. So hopefully some bits and pieces of this webinar you can take back into your classroom to help you prepare for remote learning, whether it be online or offline, and just give yourself that grace of knowing that, you know, it will take time to learn and master things, and we are in very uncertain times. All right, so first we're going to talk about Schoolnet for online learning. So for those of you who are new, Schoolnet is an online assessment platform from the NCED Cloud. Students have access to Schoolnet from home, just the exact same way that they access at school. So if your students are used to using Schoolnet to take an assessment at school, then they follow those exact same processes at home. Schoolnet does require internet access in order for you to work. And there's some background noise. Hold on just a second. All right, that should be better now. So Schoolnet, if your students are already familiar with it, then it really works seamlessly for a home transition. It does require internet access in order for the students to complete the online assessments. It does work best on laptops, desktops, Chromebooks. iPads usually work as long as its iOS is recently updated. You don't have to have the exact newest version of iOS, but you know, as long as it's recent. The older iPads do have some troubles working with Schoolnet. So just keep that in mind. Depending on the device that your students have, they may or may not have some trouble. And one important note that we'll get to as well is that when you assign tests for online learning, you're going to want to make sure that you don't use Secure Tester, because Secure Tester is our lockdown browser. It requires a application to be installed on every device used for testing. So if students are at home, they may not be using their normal devices or school-issued devices, and that would have that application on it. So you want to make sure that when you assign a test, you do not use the Secure Tester, that you use the regular test nav. I did link the system requirements in here. So if you have a parent or somebody who has very specific questions about, you know, what type of device, these are the devices that are supported in that link. All right, so that was my first tip there for testing at home. Do not require that Secure Tester. It's a checkbox when you schedule an assessment. So when you're on the scheduling page of an assessment, you have to check to use Secure Tester. So make sure you don't check that box. And then make sure that the device has an internet browser that's updated. That's one of those things to talk to your students about. Another thing is also just preparing students to be patient, because a lot of times it can take 30 or 60 seconds for a test to load, especially if a student's using a hotspot or some type of slower internet connection at their house. And so I'll show you in just a second on my screen. When Schoolnet is trying to load, there's a little spinning symbol in the top corner of the browser. And so I always try to train students that if they're seeing that little spinning symbol in their browser, that they need to leave it alone. They need to just give it a second to wait. And you know how students are, that can be a difficult thing to do, but just try to teach them that it can take a little more time, especially if you have an assessment that has, you know, 50 or, you know, 60 or 70 questions even. It's going to take a while for that test to load when the student's trying to load that test. So one thing that can happen, especially if they're using a hotspot or some type of mobile connection, is maybe they have an interruption in internet service, whether they're moving from, we've had students that are trying to take tests in cars with a mobile hotspot, and then they get home, and so they jump on the Wi-Fi. And as you would expect, when you transition from a hotspot to your Wi-Fi at home, that causes an interruption in the internet service and the test will exit. And so if that happens, then they need to contact you as their teacher to resume their test, and there are instructions right here linked for how you can do that. But just that's something that you can go ahead and tell students ahead of time. Hey, if you are, have an internet issue and your test exits for you, that let them know that you can resume that test for them. I also wanted to share this fabulous resource from Alamance Burlington School System. They have a troubleshooting document for students that they have shared, and I'll go ahead and open that up so you can look at it. And they graciously agreed to share this with everyone, so you can actually see. They put the system requirements up there at the top. And then they also put some things about how to clear your browser cache or cookies, which is also another good step. And then to talk about, your NC Ed Cloud, what to do there. So very helpful document. And we're thankful to Alamance Burlington Schools for helping and sharing this and creating it. But it's definitely something that you could take and post in your Google Classroom or something like that if you're going to be using Schoolnet at home with your students. All right, so throughout this slide deck, you'll see some little instructional challenges. So these are some quick things that I would do if I was in the classroom and, preparing for remote learning. These are some of the steps I would take. So I offer them to you as a little instructional challenge. So one of these things is just to create a very short assessment in Schoolnet. And in Schoolnet, when you create a test, you have the option to preview it as a student. And there's lots of free tools like Screencastify or Screencast-O-Matic that allows you to record your browser. And so what I would encourage you to do would be with this short 3 to 5 question test, I would assign it to your students and then use that preview as a student. And walk your students through taking the test. Walk them through the online manipulatives that are available. So there's a highlighter tool that's built into the test nav. There's, answer striker to strike out answer choices. So talking to your students about how you would take this test online and then having this recording available is very helpful for students as well as parents who may be trying to help the student navigate. And then I put in here bonus points if you happen to have a school-age child like I do, and can use their login information to kind of even show the beginning of how they even get to Schoolnet in the beginning and how they take that, enter the code and then take a test box. So that's one of your little instructional challenges, something I would do to prepare my students for the remote learning and have a resource that you can point kids back to, because I think a lot of times thinking ahead saves a lot of effort in the weeks to come when we have emails about, hey, this isn't working. You're like, okay, I have this little video right here to show you, and that'll solve some emails hopefully. All right, one last thing I wanted to talk to you about with testing online before we take a pause for questions. And that is the accommodations piece. So if you do have that internet access for students to complete assessments online, Schoolnet does support those accommodations. All right, so text to speech, read aloud, extended time, line reader, color contrast. To set up these accommodations in Schoolnet, we have something called a personal needs profile for every student, and it has to be marked with their accommodations. And then when you create a test, you have to enable the accommodations on the test. And then the test must be given online with TestNav. So I've linked the instructions, but I will go ahead and show you how to do this. Only one teacher needs to mark the personal needs profile for that student. So if you want to do this by homeroom or have some other way that I've heard all the math teachers do this on this grade level. However you want to split it up, but once it's done for one student, all the teachers of that student will have those accommodations marked for that student. So I'm going to go into Schoolnet here, and I'm logged into our training instance. So all of this information is fictitious, but basically I'm going to go in and I can go into any school. Let me pick a different one. Here we go. And if I scroll down to a student, I just click on their student name. You can also use, there's a couple of different ways to get to their profile, but I just use the homepage as the easiest way. And the last thing we're looking for is this test Nav PMV, that's the personal needs profile. And so here is where I would go in and mark the accommodations according to the student's IEP or 504 plan. So I could go ahead and, say they're supposed to have text to speech or read aloud. The default voice and the default voice speed. The students can actually change that during the test. They have like a little control where they can speed up or slow down the voice, as well as change it to male or female. So once you've marked their accommodations, you just click on save, and then you just need to go into the test and approve the accommodations. So we're going to take a second and pause. Jill, how am I looking on questions?
I do have one from Gwendolyn. She asks, as a first-year teacher, do the EOGs have the same features as you've identified, such as strike-through and highlighting?
Yes, so our browser is very similar to NC Test, which is the online platform used for testing. And so they do have the same features. It's just, it looks slightly different. I would encourage you, if you haven't gone to the NC Test website, on NC Test, you can actually view like a practice, the released forms, and have your students complete them there. So you can see the differences. It looks slightly different, but the features are the same.
And then Pam, we've got a teacher that's wondering how they get to that student profile.
So if you just go to your home screen in Schoolnet, and then when you log in, you should see what you're looking for is something called a Classroom Assessment Monitor on your homepage. And right here, you'll see there's some test results. If you scroll down, there's actually just a list of your students. And so where I see student 7329, you would see a student name. And you can just click on that student, and that brings up their profile page, which has a lot of great student data. So if you want to learn more about your students, I encourage you to look at the profile. But the personal needs profile is that last tab, Test Nav PMV.
Thanks, Pam. There's also a question about what is answer masking.
So answer masking simply blocks some of the answer choices. So that way they're only looking at like one answer at a time, and you can move the answer mask to the different answer choices for the questions.
Thanks, Pam. We have another question from Larkin. Larkin's wondering, as an inclusion teacher, can they put in the PNP information, or do they need their regular ed classroom teacher to enter it?
So if you can view your students, it just kind of depends on how you're set up in PowerSchool. If you can view your students, you're welcome to put that information in. And in fact, I encourage that as a best practice, since you will be the most familiar with their accommodations. So if you can view them, you're welcome to do that. I would just talk to your colleagues and see what the process has been established for your school. Because like I said earlier, some schools do it differently. They have the homeroom teacher. Other schools do have the case manager for that particular student. go in and be the one to mark their PMV.
All right. Thanks, Pam.
No problem. All right. With that being said, we're going to go and jump over into some things for thinking about offline use. As we know, we have much different dynamics across our state. We have some districts that, have one-to-one and some that don't. And we have some areas of our state that are very rural and can't get internet access even if you wanted it. So for that, we also have to think about offline use, right? Because remote learning doesn't mean that everything is online that the students do, right? Remote learning just means they're not in the normal classroom, but they can certainly still do a variety of activities depending on what's appropriate and best for the learner. So with offline use, Schoolnet does have a large variety of instructional materials and assessments, lesson plans, resources for students that you can print or saved as PDF. And I'm going to show you all these things in just a minute. So we're just going to talk about it for a second first. For K1 students in particular, we have a publisher called Aquella that has a very large amount of picture-based read aloud passages with questions that can be very easily printed or distributed via PDF. I've heard a lot of questions about what are we going to do for our younger students. And so this resource in particular is very valuable, in my opinion, because it's so easy to use. We're thinking we have to think about parents as well as students with remote learning and what they can help facilitate with their student. So I'm going to show you those. And then one important note, I did have a school counselor email me earlier today, and she said she's so excited about attending this webinar, but she wanted to make sure that there were things in there that school counselors can do as well. And yes, this is not just for core instructional materials, apply to everyone. So we have CTE, we have arts, PE, all of the areas instructional materials are there for. So there's a lot of things in here. Career preparation, we definitely have some of those as well. So just be thinking about how are you going to share these materials, right? If you're thinking about offline use, are you going to be printing things? Are you going to be sharing them on a PDF or some way for them to download for offline access later? Just, have that thought in the back of your mind. Okay, what is the plan going to be for how I'm going to distribute these materials? Is it going to be through a Google Classroom, or what's the workflow going to be? We also have a released bank of items. So these released items, I'll show you again in just a minute. These are for released EOG, EOC, and NCFE, which is the North Carolina final exams. You can use this bank to create a review assessment for your students. You can then print it or download PDFs. And again, where I've put things in blue here, these are links to step-by-step instructions that you can review. And then one quick note, due to the copyright agreement with the new released items for 3A ELA and English 2, these items are not in the released bank. You will see released bank items, but they're the previous older items. They're not the brand new items that just came out in January. All right, so we're going to hop over. All right, and for this part of the demo, I'm actually in the live production site because not all of our resources and materials are in the training site. So I am in our live site. So I'm just going to go from my homepage, I'm going to go down to the instructional materials module, and I'm going to click on the arrow underneath that, and I'm going to click on find materials. I want to show you all of the instructional materials available in Schoolnet and how easy it is to look for them. So first one to type in the questions, a subject area or grade level, I'm going to search for that. So I'll give you a second. I'm going to take a sip of my drink while you type in a subject area and grade level you'd like me to show you. All right, let's see if we got any fast fingers. Okay, they're going. All right, music. Let's see what we have. All right, so I'm just going to type in, let's do subject area, arts education, and then we'll do music. All right, and so you can see we have 2 tabs in our search results for instructional materials. This first tab that says North Carolina materials, those are items within Schoolnet. The second tab is Go Open and See. Go Open and See is our online statewide platform for openly licensed instructional materials. It's new. It just launched in December. It is the icon that looks like the state of North Carolina in your Go and See EdCloud tray. And if you haven't clicked on it yet, I encourage you to do so because it's a great place to find instructional resources. And we're super excited. The integration with Schoolnet just happened last week. So in a way, this is great timing for all of our preparation for remote learning. So you can click on either one of these 2 tabs to see the results. Just know that the results in Go Open and See will load in a new tab. So I'm just going to show you a Schoolnet material first. So I have these search results. I don't want to look through 1,300 things. Maybe I know in particular that I'm looking for a lesson plan, right? And then I believe in the questions there, someone typed in, I think it was 3rd grade. So I'm going to scroll down here to 3rd grade. All right, and so here is creating major scales with rhythmic variations. All right, so here's a lesson plan about creating scales. I can create a major C scale. All right. So if I wanted to view this resource, we could. We could also save it up here. That saves it to like my favorites list in Schoolnet. So that way I can look at it. And I can see all the standards that are aligned to it as well. And then I can also see the linked materials. So for this particular lesson, there are several materials that I can click on and that download. Like, so I think for this particular one looks like a picture. All right. So the word written inside the quarter note should have 1 syllable, right? So this is interdisciplinary kind of lesson. Oop. And there's my lesson plan back to it. So that's one way I can search. Another thing, I can go back and do my search results here. Maybe if I was just going to look for resources. All right, so here is a music score that I can download. All right, so traditional folk song. All right, so all kinds of resources in Schoolnet. Let's look at a different search. And this time we'll look at things and Go Open and See. So let me go back to my list. All right. Let's look at reading. All right, so one thing about Schoolnet is it does remember your searches. So if you're looking for different subject areas and grade levels, you might have to kind of refresh your search. So someone typed in here 4th grade, and we're going to do, okay, let me do a new search. There we go. That was the bigger numbers than I'm looking for. And then English, language arts. and I still have resources. All right. So now I'm going to click on that Go Open and See tab. So I'm looking at English Language Arts for 4th grade. And then maybe again, I'm looking for lesson plan. Okay, so acquiring new vocabulary through book discussion groups. So I'm just going to click on this. Again, I'm still in Schoolnet. I still have the options to save. I also have the options to build an express test. So this is a really nice feature in Schoolnet. You can go through and build an express test based on the standards that the resource is aligned to. So if you wanted to build a quick assessment, this time I'm going to click on View that resource. And you'll notice now I'm no longer in Schoolnet. I'm also on Go Open and See. And because we have single sign-on, this particular Go Open and See resource just opens right up, and I'm signed in already. And here I am viewing this resource. I can see at the top of my screen here with Go Open and See, I have the ability to share this resource directly to Google Classroom, which is a nice thing if you're thinking about remote learning and you're planning on using Google Classroom as kind of your method for distribution. You can share these resources that are student facing and appropriate right to Google Classroom. So very easy to do. All right, I wanted to take you and show you those K1 resources that I talked about for instructional materials for the, not instructional materials, I'm sorry, assessment items, those read aloud passages that are picture-based. So I'm going to skip under the assessments module, and I'm going to go to where it says items, rubrics, and passages, and I'm going to click on the magnifying glass next to find. And we're going to look for, these are passages and linked items. And that's going to take a second. And I don't know if you saw if that was quick enough. Up at the top of my screen, the little Schoolnet symbol was spinning for a second. That is what we need to train our students to see and to know that that means that Schoolnet's working. It's using its little brain and it's spinning as fast as it can. And of course, in the coming weeks, you know, if we shift to more online instruction, it is possible that Schoolnet we are working with the vendor to make sure we're monitoring usage. But just to let you know, I mean, just like anything else on the internet, if we all start using it at the same time, there might be, you know, some issues and that we'll have to get worked out with the vendor. But we are anticipating that, and we are in communication with the vendor to make sure they're ready to scale up our speed. So the keyword that I told you earlier for those K1 passages was to search by publisher. So I'm just going to type in the name of the publisher, which was Aquella. And then if I just look for kindergarten, I see this very first passage here. And if I click on view passage details, it opens it in a new window. And I can see this passage. I can see the teacher instructions. So this passage is read aloud, right? And so I can see the questions. There's 23 multiple choice questions that go along with this particular passage, right? That is read aloud about ants or ant farmers. All right, so if I wanted to assign this to my students maybe or print it, I would need to go through the steps of adding it to a test, right? So I would go through and click on add to test. Notice I'm spinning at the top there again. That was that spinning symbol I was talking about earlier. And I'm just going to create a new test. And you have to go through those steps of creating tests. So we have to give it a sample, to give it a name. We have to go through and choose this was kindergarten. And we have to choose a standards document, and we just say generate test. We don't have to worry about the rest of these settings because this is something that I'm just going to print for my students. So once the test loads, we just click on save and return to test details. And then now from this page, we have this test. We can go and we can print that student test booklet. But for these read aloud passages, you're also going to want to make sure you print the teacher instructions as well, because the teacher instructions are what has the actual passage to be read aloud. So I'm just going to save that, and I'll open it up so you can see. But here's the PDF of the questions, and then here's the PDF with the instructions nicely written out for each question, along with the passage. So it's kind of nice. It gives, parents or whoever's going to be helping the student go through this, some instructions, and their materials are right here. All right, one last thing I wanted to demo, and then we'll pause for questions again. So if you're having your questions, please make sure you're getting them in the next minute, was those released items and where they are. So under assessments again, we're going to go under and we're going to go to item banks. And so item banks is the symbol with the little briefcase. So I'm going to click on item banks. And we see all of the different item banks that are in Schoolnet. So if in particular, maybe you're looking for Spanish questions, we do have a Spanish item bank in Schoolnet. It's got about 16,000 items. So if you're looking for Spanish language questions, those are right there. Popular question that I always get asked is, can you read aloud in Spanish? Yes, it can be read aloud in Spanish if it's a Spanish item. There's no translate feature in the Schoolnet, so if you have a test of English items, there's no way it will translate and read aloud in Spanish. But if you're using Spanish items and put Spanish items on your test and click read aloud, it will read them in Spanish. So that's a good thing to note. We also have CTE items, but the bank I'm looking for those released items is this NCDPI_released bank. And so with the filters, I can just go in and I can pick my subject area. So let's do math. And if I go to 5th grade, these 30 items are the released items for 5th grade, because there's the only 5th grade math items in this bank would be the released items because it is the released bank. So we could go through the normal process of selecting these items and adding them to a test. All right. How are we doing on questions?
Okay, we have several questions on Spanish, which I know that you've just talked about Spanish, the Spanish bank and Spanish items. We've had several EC questions, how to make this relevant for EC students. So I think you're covering quite a few of the questions.
Okay, so I will say for EC students, we can edit any item that's in the bank. When you add them to a test, you're actually making a copy So you're not changing the originals in the bank that are there for everybody to see. And so you can make modifications to those. So I had some students in my classroom that had 3 answer choices on a test. So what I would do would make a copy of, I'd make my test first, then make a copy of the test and, you know, call it like the modified test and take off one of the answer choices for my EC students. There's also things for uh, directions or additional instructions. I used to use a tool called Vocaroo, which just is very simple, an audio recorder, and I would actually, whether it would be, you know, additional instructions or read aloud of answer choices or passages. This was before Schoolnet had text-to-speech. I would use Vocaroo to read it aloud and then put a link to the Vocaroo recording on the test, so that way students can click on it to hear it. So that's another option too. Maybe if you need Spanish and you can't find the items that you exactly need in the Spanish item bank, you could always make a recording of the items in Spanish if that's something that would be helpful. And then also putting links into for instructions for parents. You could also do audio instructions with Vocaroo. So there's definitely lots of ways to modify things to serve all students and their needs where they're at.
Thanks, Pam.
All right, I do have a few more resources that I want to make sure to go over and share, especially since so many folks said they were new to Schoolnet. So these last few slides, I'm just going to take a few minutes to talk about some of these resources that are here for your additional learning. So I do have another instructional challenge. I challenge you to find an instructional material in either Schoolnet or GoOpenNC that you can use. Practice downloading the resource because as you saw, things downloaded one way from Schoolnet resources and they downloaded a different way for GoOpenNC, and it just kind of depends on what the resource is, if it's a lesson plan versus if it's, you know, like the musical activity that we saw, the musical score, you know, depending on what it is, it's going to download and look a little different. So just practice getting used to what things look like, giving yourself that, you know, small grace, one step at a time attitude. I did want to share, I have Schoolnet in a blended learning classroom. This is a PDF that I've talked a lot about tonight, kind of in my main points, but it kind of summarizes things. So it talks about how students access Schoolnet, how you can use Schoolnet without internet access. There's some resources here for getting started with Schoolnet. We do have a way to link Schoolnet assessments in a Canvas course, and there's directions for this. So if you're using Canvas as your LMS and thinking about remote learning, you can create an assessment in Schoolnet. And when you get to that scheduling step, there's a button that says link to a Schoolnet, link to a Canvas course. And then you go into Canvas and link the Schoolnet assessment as an external tool, and you enter the passcode. The important thing to note about linking a Schoolnet assessment to a Canvas course is that from that point forward, the assessment can only be taken within the Canvas course. So for example, if you will have a few students that you want them to be able to use Schoolnet from home, they won't be able to access that test. If they put the passcode in, it will say this test is assigned to a Canvas course. It can only be taken in Canvas. So just keep that in mind, that it's one or all. You can't have some students take the test in Schoolnet and some students take it in Canvas. Everybody has to go through the Canvas course if you choose to link it. All right, so we can also have some possible ideas there for Schoolnet for blended learning. You know, thinking about some different ways that you could use reading assessments, passages, open-ended questions, visual models, online interactive whiteboards. I thought this was a really cool strategy I saw in a classroom. They used one question from Schoolnet and would post it in a web whiteboard and have students work out the problem on the whiteboard, the virtual whiteboard. That's a really cool way of thinking about it instead of thinking about a test and all those things, just taking one question and using it as kind of a lesson starter. And you can embed a web whiteboard within a Canvas course or share it via a link to Google Classroom as well. So this is one resource that you have linked in the presentation. Another one is just talks more in depth about that Go Open and See in the integration guide and about using resources, searching for resources, building an express test with those resources. So that's a help guide that's there for you as well. And then another question we get a lot of times, there is a calculator tool, manipulative in Schoolnet. It is not Desmos. We know we use Desmos for an NC test at the end of the year. We have asked Pearson, which is our vendor for Schoolnet, if we can get Desmos into Schoolnet. The issue is it's a licensing issue. Because Schoolnet is a national product, they would have to have Desmos in across everyone that uses Schoolnet. So what we've come up with is a workaround where you can actually embed a Desmos calculator, the exact calculator that students will use at the end of the year, into a test question. So I've made detailed step-by-step instructions on how you can do this. You have to get the embed code and copy and paste it into each question. So there's step-by-step directions on how you do this. So for you math folks, you will probably want to practice this so that way students have practice with the exact same calculator that they will have available to them on those tests at the end of the year. All right, one final check for questions. How are we doing?
And we have a lot of questions about can you connect Schoolnet to your Google Classroom, and also some there are a lot of questions about linking Schoolnet to your PowerSchool.
So there is not a way to link Schoolnet to Google Classroom. What your options are there is going through the print and download options to make your assessment as a PDF and then put it into Google Classroom that way. Keep in mind copyright. You are not allowed to take any of the Certica items and post them into Google Classroom because that's outside of Schoolnet. You're welcome to do this with any of the North Carolina items or any of the items that you've created yourself, but those Certica item banks, we pay for exclusive use of those items within Schoolnet. So you're welcome to, you need to keep them within Schoolnet or within the Canvas application of creating the test in Schoolnet and linking it into a Canvas course. But the other item banks you can download and link into Google Classroom. And then I believe another question was about PowerSchool, and so you can sync your grades. I do not have, since I'm not a teacher, I don't have the button, but there is pretty much when I go into my home page here, I'm back in the training site. Right over here where there's these where there's a test summary, there would be a button that says send grades to Power Teacher Pro. And when you click on that send grades button, it would ask you what category you want to send your grades to. So, was this particular test really a test, or was it a quiz, or what category in your Power Teacher Pro gradebook you want to send it to, and it syncs the grades. So there is a very simple and easy grade pass back between Schoolnet and PowerSchool. You just have to send the grades for each test, and when you schedule a test, there's a box you can check that says send grades. And so if you forget to do that when you're scheduling the test, then you use this box on your home page to send the grades. So very easy for that. All right. So I do have my contact information just to let you know. In each public school unit, we do have a Schoolnet contact. So feel free to reach out to that person with your questions as well, because they might have more direct answers with how things are handled in your local public school unit. But I'm also available too as well, and you have my contact information on the screen. You also have my Twitter account. I do try to tweet out a lot of free things, a lot of professional development as we go through this changing atmosphere. And I do want to say thank you to Jill, Molly, and Stacy for joining me tonight and helping out on the chat. I couldn't have done a webinar with 300 folks without them. And I do just want to thank you again for taking some time out of your crazy schedules to learn more about Schoolnet. And I just encourage you to take it slow and lean on together, and don't feel like you have to try to master this overnight. It is we are at the beginning of things, and so we all need to give ourselves grace for what's coming. So thank you.
And tonight we didn't get to everyone's questions, but what we will do is send out an FAQ later when we send you the recorded webinar and your CEU certificate.
Yes, within 5 business days. So if you didn't hear me at the beginning, it will take up to 5 business days for us to get everything, all the questions answered and summarized and put together. Thank you.
Hey everybody, this is Stacy out here in Catawba County, and I just wanted to chime in and say how this was one of the most engaging webinars I've been in lately, with all your questions and your participation. And I couldn't be here right at the beginning because all of a sudden my computer just decided to go crazy and shut down. But thank you all for being here, and reach out to Pam, Molly, Jill, or I on Twitter. We are just so excited and dedicated to helping you guys. It's unprecedented times, so thank you all for being here tonight.
Yes, we echo what Stacy said. Our team is just trying to do everything we can to support you, and we know that there's no perfect answers in those situations, but we hope to provide as many resources as we can to help you make the best decisions that you can for your learners. So thank you, and good night.